Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar, The Future of Custom Clothing is Now, Harnessing AI and 3D Tech to Accelerate Made-to-Measure and On-Demand Manufacturing. We've got a lot of folks joining us today, but I'm going to get going because we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping here. My name is Whitney Cathcart. I am the co-founder of 3D Look, and I will be your moderator today. I've got three great panelists joining me. They also happen to be 3D Look customers, but I want to start with a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this, and we will be making our recording available along with key insights after the event, so you can share that with friends or colleagues, or if anybody has to get off early, know that we'll be following up. We'll also save some time at the end for Q&A. You'll see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, so go ahead and type in questions there. We will get to as many as we can. We tend to get a lot in these webinars, and we'll follow up with any questions that we don't get answered when we do our recap email. Before we get started too, we sent out a survey yesterday, and thank you to all of those people that actually answered it. We appreciate that. And I thought I would kind of interject some of the answers along the course of the conversation today. And one of them that I wanted to start out with, because I think it's quite interesting, was a question around, are you familiar with AI in 3D? And the responses that we got were 80% of you were somewhat familiar, 10% were very familiar, and 10% were not at all familiar. So my hope today is that what you will gain out of this is a better understanding of AI and 3D technologies, but even more so is how they're being used in real-world case studies to deliver value today. So we'll get started. For those of you who aren't familiar with 3D Look, and I know we've got a lot of great people here joining today that we know, but for those who don't, 3D Look is an advanced AI and 3D technology company. Our core technology essentially measures the human body from 2 photos taken on a smartphone by a user in tight-fitted clothing. There's no need to download an app. And we are going to be talking about today with our panelists, our product Mobile Tailor, which is a solution. I like to think of it as a solution that delivers precise 3D models and measurements to anyone who needs great fit. So we're going to start with a little video about what Mobile Tailor is and how it works.
Mobile Tailor, 3D precision, anytime, anywhere. Mobile Tailor delivers impeccable fit with precise body measurements, enabling a more sustainable and less wasteful fashion industry, appealing to eco-conscious consumers. Using cutting-edge AI and 3D technologies, just 2 smartphone photos generate precise 3D models and over 80 measurements in seconds. Intuitive, fast, accurate. Your pocket-sized fitting room to elevate and enhance every in-store and online measurement experience. Make fit personalization at scale possible. When the exact fit is your brand, Mobile Tailor delivers. A platform that reduces measuring time, returns, remakes, and waste. The future of fit? It's here. Mobile Tailor.
Great. So let's take a look. We're going to start with some statistics, and I want to take a look at the size of the custom clothing market, because these statistics are pretty impressive. A 51% increase since 2021, projected to be $68 billion by the end of next year. So the question kind of is, how do businesses adopt to this swiftly changing landscape of technology and personalization? And that's what we're going to talk about today as we dive into the significance of digital transformation and hear from 3 pioneering entrepreneurs who are already leveraging 3D and AI technologies to redefine the customer experience and show that the future of customization and fit personalization is already here. I want to start by introducing our first panelist, Ravi Pun. Ravi is the CEO and founder of celebrity brand Baines and Baker. He's also been a Mobile Tailor customer since way back in 2020. He employs AI to modernize bespoke tailoring for today's digital era. His visionary approach led him to 3D Look, and now he leads a rapidly growing bespoke business serving celebrities. And I'll let him talk a little bit about the types of bodies that he's measuring, because they're unique. And he's now running an amazing experiential store in New York City, which everybody should visit because it has the coolest speakeasy hidden in the back. So Ravi, always well dressed, always glad to see you. Thanks for being with us today. I'd love if you could take a second, because your background is so unique. You started in real estate, you were a successful developer there, and you decided to take that satiation you have for amazing experiences and move it into fashion. So how did you do that? Who are you serving, and why did you move to 3D?
Cool. So firstly, thanks for having me. Obviously, we've got to know each other pretty well over the years, so appreciate you having me on the panel. A little bit about me. So my background through and through has been real estate. I went to school for real estate, and going back almost 15 years now, all I've ever done before fashion was real estate development, investment, from the ground up. And so the way Baines and Baker started, it's kind of a weird story, because it all happened as I was still practicing real estate development. So one of the things that I would do in my previous career, a lot of fundraising for deals, a lot of traveling. I was dealing with a lot of investors overseas to kind of obviously try and raise capital for real estate deals that I had in Vancouver at the time. And I had always sort of been into dressing well, and obviously, wearing suits and shirts. And I go to Asia in 2015, and I was blown away by sort of the way they do business. I found out real quick that, if you meet anybody in Shanghai, you don't really meet them at 9 or 10 in the morning like you would here sort of in North America. A lot of the business dealings happen at night. So me being in Shanghai, I learned real quick that all my meetings were over dinner, nightlife, etc. And I go down to the guy in the lobby at the hotel, and I was like, I'm here obviously for work, but I've got nothing else I could possibly do. So I ended up finding sort of a tailor, and I was blown away by the ease of having a custom suit made, the speed, and custom suits back then were one of the things that if you didn't have a ton of money, if you didn't have $2,000 to $3,000, you were kind of priced out of that experience. It was something that's extremely luxurious, very there's a lot of hand holding as you're shopping. And so for me, one of the reasons I came back and actually got into the suits after a while, I came back with 50 suits. Long story short, I knew I was wearing suits all the time, and so I built out my wardrobe, and I've got pink suits, red suits, suits that would obviously get your attention, but that's how I would dress normally. And after a year of going to meetings and events, there was enough people that were kind of like, you should start a suit company. You kind of have something here. So I had no experience in fashion other than probably just having an eye for style in the menswear space. So it's kind of weird how it all kind of came to be. That was kind of how Baines and Baker started in 2015.
And then how did you go from that to using AI technologies? When did you know that this was going to be an essential solution that you needed to some of the problems that you were having?
I mean, to be honest, a 3D Look, like from 2015 to 2020, up until about COVID, we were doing everything in person, obviously measuring people within Vancouver, Toronto, New York with a measuring tape. And there was at that time, there's a lot of alterations because you're training people also like myself that don't have a textile background, don't have necessarily fashion experience. There's more a retail position in these cities, and so we were dealing with a ton of alterations. And we were selling suits for $4.99, $5.99. So anytime you're getting into an external tailor for alterations, that would absolutely kill any type of profit you thought you were making on the suit. So 2020 happens, we're growing, and sort of I could probably confidently say 3D Look is one of the reasons I I kind of graduated from the real estate development career to pursue Baines and Baker full time. So in 2020, one of the things you obviously couldn't do in March was get into somebody's space and measure them, let alone see other people. So we were kind of forced to figure out a way to still be able to do what we do, which is creating custom suits. But if you can't measure a new customer, you're literally in no man's land. So we reached out to 3D Look. I was super skeptical myself, just because it's tech and it's new and you don't know if it's going to be accurate. And then once it started working, we actually scaled. So it allowed us to send links to people that we weren't necessarily, they weren't necessarily able to come to our store for a fitting. And when that started happening, I was like, okay, we've got something here with the brand. The technology kind of amplifies the brand that we already have. And that's when I made the move to New York about 2 years ago, because I felt a lot of momentum in what we were doing.
Yeah. So really using technology to scale your business and the importance of that. I think that takes us like really quick. If you want to look at a tech-driven slide that shows how fast the pace of technology is moving, I call it from loom to zoom. So, we started with customization way back in the beginning, right? In the first industrial revolution. Here we are in the fifth now. And I think what's astonishing to look at is the timeline between the fourth and the fifth, right? Because the fourth we're looking at, 10, 15 years ago. So for brands and retailers, this accelerated pace means that keeping up with customer expectations really is like not even an option anymore. It's imperative. And it's interesting to note that in this return to true customization, we're able to scale it up now because we've got a mass proliferation of intelligence and exponential increases, especially in compute, that are now being used to train these cutting edge AI models that are enabling us to make these incredible advancements in AI and 3D. That leads us to our next guest, and I want to introduce Abhi. Abhi, super awesome to have you, and I think really interesting because you've got a background. You're unlike many people who are more fashion people. You've actually got a background in computer engineering from McGill up in Canada, an amazing institution where a lot of big tech pulls from. But yet you're also a change maker in the fashion industry, and you're really rethinking a product that is notoriously impossible for people to buy online, denim, right? We're a million different sizes in denim. And you've kind of masterfully merged, tech and fashion, integrating 3D Look as, one piece of what you're doing into your platform to kind of reimagine sizing in denim. Super curious. You've got an incredible name there, Slow. It suggests slow manufacturing. Welcome. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to fashion and, how you, with a background in computer engineering, are using AI and 3D and kind of where you're planning to go with it without hitting on disco yet?
Of course. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and once again, thank you for having me here. So, getting started with Slow's very interesting story and how we got onto focusing on denim by itself. Slow, I'm a co-founder with my with my friend Christian, and this all started with actually him stumbling upon a women's jeans in a thrift store, not knowing that they were a pair of women's jeans. And then, he was trying to fit things into his pockets and he wasn't able to, just daily, AirPods and his mobile phone, it would stick out halfway out. And then it all started with just one silly video on TikTok, just complaining about how abysmal the jeans were, about how the pockets were just non-existent. And that really sparked a conversation in the comment section more than we thought that it would. And this led us to sort of make more videos and strike a conversation with everyone in the comment section and really ask them what was wrong with the jeans that were out there, specifically women's jeans that were out there. And we got a lot of comments about pockets, but we opened up a form and we got about 700,000 form submissions. And almost 80% of all those form submissions talked about how sizing was, a big problem, especially because a lot of different brands have their own sizing system, and some brands don't have a certain size and other brands do. So people really need to pick and choose where they have to shop from. And so, it was with this realization that we realized that, off the rack jeans just are not giving people the satisfaction of shopping. It is not fulfilling their needs. And, as an experiment, when we went into stores and we picked out certain garments, we really like sort of spread the garment apart. We read the compositions, and we could see that, things were not stitched properly, or things were like, or the composition is just not well done. And we really started getting the idea that, all these clothes were just designed to be worn for a certain period of time and then, thrown away. And so, this sort of this sort of practice of not taking into consideration of people's needs of sizing, and trying to fit people in a standardized size set, even though a lot of people have different bodies, shapes, and sizes, and also not taking care of the environment, just having no sort of environmental consciousness, really got us to go towards the slow fashion model, and realize that there's a market out there, and people really want custom fit jeans, and they want personalized jeans, and that is what we want to offer.
And so you're offering many different sizes. So you take measurements, and then what do you do with them?
So at the moment, what we're trying to do with the measurements is trying to understand body proportions, and match them to the size from our size set. So rather than having people browse through a size chart, or actually not even look at the size chart, make a judgment that they would be a certain size because they wear a certain size in a different brand, and make that guesstimation of like what they would fit, we do the part of using 3D look to get people's body measurements, and using those body measurements to then tell people what size they would fit from our current size set.
And you've really used data to actually create sizing that I've never seen before. It's almost like, we're not, a 27, 28, 29, 30. You've really reinvented sizing. So I think it's super interesting what you're doing with all that data that's coming out from bodies. You said something, and it actually speaks right into this, because as we're like in this age of personalized retail, where we're coming out, and I have denim here, actually, serendipitously, I actually didn't even plan to have denim here. But if you think about it, for decades, we've been like I always call it clothing that fits everyone and yet no one, right? And it's generated massive revenues, but it's also generated massive returns, hundreds of billions of dollars over the last several years, right? As we're all being, we're one body, or we're many different bodies, and we're expected to fit into this standard. And so what that's done is it's created this, huge problem with returns. Where we're going, and what actually all three of you, and we've got about 100 customers sitting on Mobile Tailor, but where we're going here is this age of mass personalization, fit personalization, customization, bespoke, where things are made for me. And I like to call it, clothing that actually fits you. All of this is only made possible by technology and automation. So if you think about those tools that go into that ecosystem, starting with, consumer body scanning, right? Getting measurements from a consumer rather than guessing what do consumers look like. 3D design tools and configurators, Optitex, Clo, Browseware, Style 3D, going into, pattern and cutting automation, Lectra, Gerber, digital printing, Kornit, these big companies. And it's really then taking it from almost like body to factory. And at the end of that, the person that benefits is the end consumer, because now they are able to get something that is both customized, but also personalized to their own body. And my next guest, Cheryl, I'm happy to welcome, and this is actually one of Made's products. Cheryl is one of the co-founders of Made Outdoors, And what is so interesting and unique about you, Cheryl, is you come from Big Brand Outdoors, an amazing outdoor brand that I think all of us know well, where you were manufacturing, what I come out of manufacturing would consider highly technical, difficult things to produce, right? In some cases, harder to produce even than suits. And you've taken that mindset of making a design for and fitting it onto many, many, many different shapes and bodies to this idea of how does technology enable technical apparel for one, and how can you do it and actually make money on it and find factories to do it. So I'm super excited to have you today. And now that we've got all three of you really start this conversation. It would be great if you could talk about like some of the.
Sorry, it's a bit of a lag on my end.
I know, like, one of the things people always ask us, and I know you've actually been through this, are kind of what are those hurdles of going from mass to one, and how do you do that? What are some of the things that you guys experienced, and what are the solutions that you've had to turn to in order to rectify that?
Yeah, so we, like you said, making outerwear is an incredibly technical product. The tech packs and information that you need for manufacturing are, it's a significantly higher threshold than something like, any other product category. So we're actually a team of 3 co-founders. 2 of us come from Arc'teryx and have that experience working on highly technical product through to manufacturing. And one of us is just an avid skier and in brand, but he came at it from he really wanted that personalized experience. He's had many custom suits. He's really enjoyed that experience. And we came at it from our experience in working for a brand, making these standardized, like you said, one size fits none. These standardized products, we would be in fittings and we'd say things like, oh, keep in mind that this model's arms are too short, or this model's hips are a centimeter over our standard. I personally was, a different size on top and the bottom. And so I'd be skiing and my jacket would start to slip up over my hips because it was too small on my hips. And that, when you're coming to skiing, is a hazard. Like, if I'm in frigid conditions and my jacket is starting to ride up, that's just not, like, performance wise, just not safe. It's not comfortable. So that's sort of where we came at it from. And that hurdle of trying to fit everyone, but still being able to provide the factory with all of the information that they needed for each individual order, was where we started to get into the realm of having to make our own technology to adapt things that are built for suiting or other product categories to bridge the gap in tech, like in construction difficulty.
Right.
So we built those things ourselves, and we're still building them and adjusting and tweaking things to make it better all the time. But that was kind of our biggest hurdle.
How automated are you right now?
We are, if I put a percentage to it, like about 50 to 60% automated on our back end. And then in manufacturing, we're still 100% standard manufacturing. We don't have automation implemented at point manufacture yet.
Yeah. But you've been able to find a factory that can make highly technical gear and make ones, as opposed to, hundreds or many, many, many thousands, right? With minimums, right?
Yes. Yeah. And they're an amazing partner for us. They're really, like, it's truly a partnership of, like, building this thing together. They believe in it just as much as us. So that was really important for us.
Yeah. And I think we'll talk about how we're going from, like, body to automation and patterns in a little bit. But Abhi, I wanted to have you pipe in a little bit, because obviously you're using AI to collect measurements. I'd love to have you share how this has worked. You've had 2 big launches already. You have a very unique business model, but how is that AI and how is that data that it has generated data, or how's the AI that has generated the data that you need inspired some of where you're going with Disco AI? It's a cool name. Tell everybody what Disco is.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, at first, I'd like to just touch on the fact that we have had like two big launches. And, with the two major launches that we have had, we've produced about, more than 8,000 pairs of jeans, about 4,000 of which have been, unique one of one pairs. And I think we've just had the privilege, in the last year or so to just work with a lot of different types of customers. One thing that 3D Look has enabled us to do is like get people's measurements very easily. And we have had more than 10,000 different scans. And the one thing I can say confidently is that, no one scan is the same as the other. And this just goes to show that everyone has a very unique body. Everyone has unique bodies, and trying to fit them in one standardized size is not is not ideal, and it's not a good experience. Just like Cheryl was saying about, with just jackets, sometimes they're loose at the bottom or they're loose at the top just because everyone has a different body. And so what our plans with Disco is, and what just having all of this data and seeing all these different body shapes and sizes has made us realize is that going forward, if we want to provide a personalized experience to people, we really need to, get down to understanding people's body shapes. And so the one thing that we want to do with Disco is sort of complement the data that we're getting from 3D Look, data about people's waist measurements, their hip girth, and their outer inseam, the inner inseam, and use all of this data along with, their choices of what jeans they want, to really give them a suitable size. Because one of the things that Slow is focusing on at the moment is sort of expanding their size set. Whitney, you mentioned that, our size set already is big enough than what you have seen on the website, but, it still does not cater to some people, because as long as we're having people come to our returns and exchanges, it means we're still missing a certain group of people and not satisfying their sizes. And so, we're planning on expanding our size set even more. And the one thing I've realized in my last year of being involved with production of jeans is that there are other things that sort of take into account when you're trying to make well-fitted jeans, is the properties of like the type of fabric that you're using, the composition of the fabric. And going on into the future, we want to allow people, our customers, the choice to choose their choice of fabric. And also, the color of the fabric also influences how stretchy the fabric becomes at the end of production. And so, what we really want to do with Disco is take these data points about what the customer wants, their choice of fabric, their color, as well as the measurements that we're getting from 3D Look, and use all of that information to learn what would be the most appropriate size to give to a customer from our, extensive one-of-a-kind size set. But on top of that, learn from people's returns and exchanges requests to add more sizes into our system and constantly update the ratios of understanding body
Yeah.
proportions.
So it's using that data to train those new models.
Exactly, using it as a
That actually goes exactly to where consumers are looking to go, right? So this slide is all about customization and fit personalization. And you can see in the data here that, about, 40 to 50 to 60%, based on that, consumers are looking for some sort of customization. So whether it's color, whether it's style, whether it's fit personalization, all of which the three of you are doing. Cheryl, you're using AI in 3D. You're also using 3D. You're also using configurators. So talk a little bit about like how those technologies work together to deliver that experience to the customer that is obviously the customer wants. So how are you doing that?
Yeah, so our configurator has gone through a bunch of different iterations. We wanted to allow the customer, like you said, you really clearly on the slide, is like customers really want that personalization. There's a lot of assumptions in the fashion industry that like, oh, people want more black, people want more of this, people want more of that. And, what we're finding is that that's not really been the case in our back end data. Like customers want to choose, and sometimes they'll default to black just because it's the only thing that they feel okay with. So we've taken our customizer and our configurator, and we basically take all those three streams of data and run it through our system, which is essentially a filter to combine those things together. With outerwear and the types of materials that we're using, it's a little bit it's not as complex as with denim. Like I know denim has just crazy properties when you come to dyeing and stuff. So we're able to make those different combinations and changes. And then from our sizing, we also reinvented sizing and neutralized it. So we don't have like men's and women's sizing per se. We have bust and chest. And our pattern team has built that to the millimeter to make that possible and fit. And it's become really amazing to put those through all the systems together. And it comes out with, like, our system will come out with a fully customized, individualized tech pack product for the factory. And then from there,
So I know we often, get these questions around how are you going from, how are you automating going from measurements to patterns, right? So I'd love if actually each one of you could just briefly, quickly kind of touch on that one.
We use Gerber Made to Measure. I saw somebody mentioned it in Q&A. We love Made to Measure. It's a great system. Again, for us with technical apparel, a lot of the systems are built for suiting or other types of products. So for us, we built our additional technology on top of that to bridge the gap. But the way Made to Measure automates some aspects of the pattern has been amazing for us.
How about you, Avi?
At the moment, we have like we have our cuts defined. And so we have like the base patterns already made. And so when we start getting people's measurements and we, fit them to a certain size, we just manually alter the tech packs at the moment and then put them back into production. But going into the future, as Cheryl was mentioning, there are softwares out there that sort of take in body measurements and create a one-of-one tech pack or like outputs for you in the future. And that is something that we're trying to build into as we're acquiring our own factory and getting automated cutting machines and so on.
Right. It's removing the hand in between those steps.
Exactly. It'll just make it a lot more faster and add more automation to the process and just reduce the
Robbie,
production.
how are you doing it? Taking the digital measurements? You're on mute.
Sorry, we actually just recently did this, so we weren't having issues, but like a lot of the guys that we measure are football players, so we had to we took 40 of sort of like the base measurements that we were getting for guys 6'5" and taller, and then 250 and more, and it was like the upper body, and so taking that, that's allowed us to like actually hone in on these athlete bodies that are unique, to say the least.
Yeah, they're very unique. And you're one of the reasons that we did so much work last year in our R&D team on expanding on data sets that, are not, I would say, typical, right? Not everybody is a football player or basketball player, and you're kind of dressing the who's who in both of those industries. I want to take a quick pivot here and talk a little bit about sustainability, which we call the unsustainable loop, returns and waste. So we've got, over 100 billion garments being produced every year. As more people shop online, and they will continue to, because the world is only getting more digital, particularly with Gen Z, which we'll get into in a second, but we see brands that have in certain categories over 50% return rate. So that's super unsustainable. You've got, if it's going back into inventory, into markdown, if it's not selling, we all know where it winds up. So for us, personalized shopping isn't really a luxury. It's actually a sustainability solution. And super interesting facts here. If no action is taken, the fashion industry's global emissions will increase by 50% in, under the next decade. So about 7 years. So like we just can't not do anything about it, particularly, all of us who love being in the fashion industry. So what have you guys, like, how does that feed into your brand DNA? And what do you see in terms of returns?
For us, sorry, Ravi.
I was going to say, go ahead.
Yeah.
Like our brand mission is to create a world where everybody feels safe and welcome and included in the outdoors, and doing so as sustainably as possible. Because we've been in the industry and in outerwear specifically, we've seen the impact. And so it was really important to us to build that into our margins, to build that into how we build product. And with made to measure and made to order, that's a huge piece of that puzzle for us, because we're not having additional inventory that's getting marked down or just ending up in landfill at the end of season. Everything that we make already has a home and already has a purpose. And because we're fully customizing for what customers want, we're finding that they're not going to go and get a new jacket every single season trying to figure out what they want or trying to figure out what works for them, because they get to design exactly what they want rather than waiting for the right thing to come around. So we're finding that customers are more committed to their product. And because we're not making excess inventory, we can carry through colors and carry through fabrics through infinity.
And also not making excess samples, because you were using 3D models into 3D design software. So you're designing on 3D models in the first place.
Exactly. And we're starting to expand into collaborations where, other brands might have started to do, or try to do something in the outerwear space, but they don't have the expertise, or they don't have the minimums to carry inventory. And so it's great because we're expanding into helping other brands also beef up their outerwear program while also staying sustainable.
Great. I'm gonna make sure we're leaving time for Q&A. I know this is going so fast. Go, Ravi.
I just wanted to say on that, that was one of the questions I was looking forward to, but it's tricky because a lot of what we do with custom suits is there's a ton of personality that goes into it. And so you take this generation that, instead of going to work 15 years ago where just your coworkers saw you and maybe the people that you really know, like now it's, if I post it on social media, everybody knows I have this green suit. And so a lot of that is like, I actually coach people to say, and it's like being sustainable in a way. Obviously, we're making one piece, but it's like, if you wear that suit once, everybody's going to know you have it. I'd rather put you in a fabric that you can wear 3 to 5 times a month, change the tie, change the shirt. And I'll really coach guys up. And it's like, of course, we want our Instagram feed to, you scroll and you see all these cool looks, and fast fashions kind of hurt that because it's the price point. It's like, hey, I can go into Zara and get something for $100. Why am I going to buy a custom blazer for $500? Obviously, there's quality and much more that goes into it, but in their head, it's like, I could post it once, it could rot in my closet. I'll be happy I didn't pay that much for it. And that's a battle. That's like an absolute sort of thing that we're dealing with all the time. And that's why with women's, we haven't launched, because it's tricky. It's different.
Well, and there are lots of different body shapes. And then you've got, many women, I should say, are, they're fashionistas. They all love fashion. Abby, you had the TikTok gene, right? We're moving over to Gen Z here, but you think about that younger generation, over $360 billion worth of buying power. They outspend other age groups by 15%. They'll command a third of the market by 2030. They're eco-conscious. They are redefining how we understand value and sustainability. They're buying luxury 3 to 5 years earlier than millennials and older generations, which is like a stunning statistic, really. And brands that share these values are seeing dollars spent on those brands. Avi, you not only did you collect a lot of data and understand about the denim, but the values and mission of kind of all three of you all have Gen Z consumers. Ravi, you've got a ton of pro ball players that are in their 20s. So how do you see this impact on your brands, and how are you catering to this incredibly important generation?
I think I kind of just touched on it, but a lot of it is well, athletes are very different because disposable income is at a whole different level and they have way more eyes on them. But a lot of them want a luxury, like the same experience I had. It's like a lot of what their past sort of pretense of custom suits is like $3,000 to $4,000, and a part of that is saying, look, like you don't need to spend that much money to get a custom product. We can do the exact same thing because we have tech. And one of the biggest pushbacks is guys that are sort of, like I said, 6'8", 375 pounds, like big offensive linemen. They're always like, oh, I have problems with custom suits all the time. We just did the NFL draft 5 months ago. And I was telling them, I was like, look, even if I meet you in person, I'm going to use the app. If you just take this link and just listen to me and just scan yourself, I promise you it'll be. So there's like a lot of that education going into it, but it's like, it's a tricky sort of generation where they appreciate custom, but then like on my last answer, like fast fashion kind of disrupts that, and it like disrupts the mentality with the pricing.
Right, but a
So
good
they're more
quality,
wasteful because
a
it's
good quality suit, they're gonna get something custom. There's a question actually around conversion into scanning, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So to the person in the audience who asked that question, we're going to have some answers for you in a minute. I want to jump over to how these technologies that you guys are already using are impacting price, because it's a big conversation. Are consumers willing to pay more? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But we also bring in the automation piece, which is enabling what was actually not possible a decade ago or 2 decades ago. Certainly, you know, my career has seen us through, you know, the teen mall, fast fashion, and we've, you know, watched so many big fast fashion companies go out of business, and many of them now claiming sustainability and all of these things. You guys are showing that by using technologies that you're actually able to produce custom suit and not lose your socks on ROI. So can you talk a little bit about that? Cheryl, I think you and I had an interesting conversation about that a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so we see, and I think there was a question in the Q&A as well, but like we see that technology as really enabling us to hold our price point. So we're in line with other premium outerwear brands. Our pricing is feature for feature, similar to what you'd pay for an Arc'teryx or Patagonia jacket. We've differentiated a little bit in that we do a la carte costing. So we start with a base price, and then customers can add premium features like additional pockets or powder skirt or other specific features for an additional cost. We find that that's really great because it adds a layer of transparency for consumers understanding and knowing that like these additional things do cost money versus fast fashion, where I think people just kind of like absorb stuff and grab stuff because it's cheap. And we wanted to sort of help with sort of turning the tide on that. And we find customers are like really excited about the fact that they can get a custom kit for the same price as they'd get off the rack. So it's an easier choice for them. And then we're using technology to enable that. So we need to be really tight on our processes and how we do things on the back end so that we have that margin still. So that's why we're leaning into like automation and technology, because the less human hours we have, the lower our overhead is, and the better it is for us to be able to keep those prices.
Ravi, you did something interesting, because when you got your, you know, you went from manual, we'll talk manual to digital. You had a lot of issues with inconsistencies in manual. You went to digital, you actually doubled the retail on your suit. So talk about that transition a little bit.
I mean, it's unique because when we came in, like I said, my mindset was, at the time before I got my custom suits, I was shopping at Zara buying suits, and the thing with Zara was that the fit was phenomenal. It was slim fit, it was very fashion forward. And when we started Baines & Baker, I was like, I don't want anybody to pay $2,000 for a custom suit. I want to sell these suits at $399. Terrible business model. Then we went to $599, $699, $799. And then as we got the app, obviously our brand presence grows at the same time this is all happening. But now we're at $12.99. And people still think we're too cheap in the market. But that's kind of like, I don't know if I'll ever, obviously, like I said, from a business standpoint, we could probably charge more now because our brand has grown. But yeah, like people, if you're giving them not only service, but I feel like the technology aspect makes the company seem like they've invested a lot more in what they're doing as opposed to walking into a tailor shop who's been there for 50 years. Like people appreciate technology.
Yeah. Avi, how about you? Pricing.
Our entire goal has trying to make our product as accessible as possible. You know, right now when you talk about custom products or like personalized jeans or like jeans made to your specification with the fabric that you want, the hardware that you want, you think of very big, you know, very large price points. But that's like the barrier that we wanted to avoid. And so, you know, we are priced around $100 right now. And even with like all the customization options that we want to provide, I think the max that we will ever go up to is about 130, 150 at the moment. As well as, you know, try to get some sort of payment option so people can pay this incrementally over time. But the name of the game is like make it as accessible as possible, because, you know, we're not just trying to sell clothes here, we're also trying to educate people about making responsible decisions when they're buying their clothes.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
So I want to leave, we've got some really great questions. One of the survey questions was, is AI and 3D tech an essential part of made to measure and customization over the next 2 years? 70% of the audience said definitely, 20% probably, 10% not sure. I think that's super interesting. The hand versus scan goes to, we had one of the survey questions is what are you planning to implement within the next year? And 60% of you said mobile body scanning, 20% said virtual dressing, 20% said custom configurators. There's a lot of questions about manual versus scanning versus accuracy. I want to throw this to my customers because it's one thing for me to say it. It's much better coming from you guys. I want to start with you, Avi. If you're going to throw a mobile body scanning against the manual, who wins, why, and what kind of value have you seen on it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say, I mean, if they were on like a face off, I would definitely say mobile body scanner would win. And I'm not just saying that because we are at this conference today. I'm saying that, you know, based on the experience with dealing with customer orders from our last 2 launches as well. And in terms of like the reason, I would say it's basically consistency in recording and, you know, calculating the body measurements. You know, with customers manually measuring themselves, one of the biggest questions that we have to answer and that remains unanswered until they receive their product is, did they did they measure themselves properly with the measuring tape? You know, did they put it on the right part of the body? Did they measure the right part of the body? Did they, you know, pull in the measuring tape in too tight or like not tight enough? And, you know, all these questions remain unanswered, and you don't hear it until, you know, they have a returns and exchange request. And then you found out that, you know, there's something wrong. And so, you know, as you can see from the stats during our first launch, almost 80% of our size related returns and exchanges were resolved just by putting those manually measured customers back to the 3D look flow and knowing where the discrepancies were. So for me, consistency in just how you're recording is a win. Yeah.
Okay, Ravi, over to you, because you went from manual to digital years ago.
No, I mean, I think fundamentally you have to understand measurement to really benefit from 3D look. Like you can't just think you're going to scan everybody and jump into to a new business or even an existing, like amplifying existing business. I think we have to like absolutely go to the measuring tape to understand how it works and that. But then once you educate yourself, and then you can talk to your manufacturers or wherever you're getting stuff produced from. It's just the consistency. You can't beat it. 3D look starts and ends at the same point. A lot of issues we were having with manual measurements is that, like I said, if you have an employee in Chicago who's just been trained through a PowerPoint and maybe once or twice, the start and end point could even be off by half an inch, but that'll screw up on the back end. So I think consistency with 3D look is by far the greatest asset.
And Cheryl, you've done a lot of work in your different launches and use that data to kind of reinforce. So how do you look at manual versus scan?
Yeah, I think we come from a little bit of a different point. We only have used the 3D scan. We started during the pandemic, so for us even to be able to launch, it was absolutely key to find a good measurement partner. I will give a small caveat to the 0% remakes that we are still in production for some of those, so that number might change, is likely to change to at least a little bit here or there, but still really, really low. When we started, I think to Ravi's point, like the consistency of 3D look has allowed us to sort of look at our different production phases and say, okay, we know exactly where that measurement point is of the bicep and the hip, because we know where 3D look does that. So we can look at that for each production phase, and we've adjusted our patterns a little bit for where we know we have a little bit of a variance, versus when we did a trial where we had customers measure themselves with, you know, instructions with a video at home, and it was just all over the map, like couldn't even begin to predict the consistency of that. So that we've really, I think for us, it's just the scan is the way.
Okay. Thank you all. we have some like great questions from the audience. So thank you, audience, for that. I actually want to start with this one because I think this is interesting. There's a difference between the actual self and the perceived self, which we've certainly seen over the years. Confronting a customer with their body scan can cause negative effects on their mental health. You guys are not showing anybody their body scans, right? You're just collecting measurements. I know, Cheryl, you're using 3D inside in tech design and using one of the 3D design platforms, but that it's kind of a twofold system. How are customers reacting to scanning, and do you show them 3D models? I don't think, Ravi, you're even getting 3D models. We keep them on the back end.
No, we do. I got a funny story about that, but I'll let Cheryl go first.
We don't show the 3D model to customers at this point. We use them for a 3D fit on our back end to ensure that we've done, you know, our diligence on the fit. We do anticipate allowing the option of customers to see their 3D scan. We've actually found, just like anecdotally from customers, that the 3D scan is actually less confronting than them physically measuring themselves, because they aren't, you know, holding the measuring tape and seeing that number. So
Right.
you know, I can't say like, you know, 100% one way or another, but I've had those conversations and it doesn't seem to be as big of a problem with that. And then, yeah, we're going to allow the option. We're not going to immediately show someone their 3D scan, but we want to be able to integrate 3D and VR and show them their jacket on themselves and potentially into a VR experience in the future.
Great. Ravi, anybody else?
So we did an event a few months ago, and this was the first time we kind of showed people their measurements. It was a real estate event in Manhattan, and I was like, "Oh, this will be cool. We'll set up the iPad and we'll scan people." And then obviously the iPad's front facing, and then we were showing all men their measurements, and the 3D scan is obviously like the avatar was one of those things. And some of the reactions I got, I was like, okay, this might not be the best thing to start doing. So we do it in store. But if somebody's online, we don't send it out, just because like obviously it creates the avatar, but sometimes the shirt can make like the belly a little bit bigger, or certain things a little bit bigger. But yeah, so I kind of stopped doing that at events, but we'll do it in store, and we'll go through and kind of show them, and then people are blown away by the tech. Like, oh wow, you did all that with 2 pictures. But yeah, it was interesting the first time, I thought, when we did it.
Yeah. Well, Mobile Tailor gives you guys the ability to customize what you want the user to see, right? I know most of our customers don't even show end users their measurements, because we all have a perception of what we look like. Let's go. Are 3D models compatible with 3D design? Yes, they are. Cheryl's actually using Clo. Using Clo?
Yes.
Yeah, use Clo. But they are compatible. They can be exported and uploaded into any of the different 3D designs. Oh my God, so many questions. Do plus size create especially difficult situations for manufacturing for made to measure? For 3D look, we've done a lot of work on plus size, so we actually have a lot of data. I mean, I think the fact that we are able to accurately measure Ravi's consumers, which are, again, they do not look like most of us because they're football players and, basketball players. To the panelists, how do you get your customers to scan?
Sure, I can start off with that one. I mean, at the moment, we have a standalone site in addition to our Shopify site, where customers basically, first get the instructions on how to go through 3D look. We give them a notice about that we don't save their images, and refer back to 3D Look's policy about how their images will be used to calculate their sizes. We give them a little bit of instructions about do's and don'ts for going into the 3D Look mobile tailor flow, and then they have access to the widget. But this sort of is a separate experience to our buying experience. And so going forward into the future, we're trying to merge sizing as part of the profile creation. So one of the mandatory steps would be to sort of save your measurements in your profile. So, in the future, every time you're making a purchase for a custom product and you're selecting different fabrics and colors, you don't have to memorize what your numbers are and keep re-inputting them. It'll just grab it from your profile and automatically assign you a size using Disco. And so that way, the only thing you're doing is just adding things to your wardrobe and just making jeans.
Yeah. Ravi, there was a question specifically to you. I mean, you have a very unique clientele, but how do they look at scanning? I know you send links to people in their, vacation homes in Italy and all sorts of things.
I mean, the most effective way is sort of the SMS feature. I'll take just their phone number and flip that over to them. We do have the button on our webpage, so either or. But most of the time, it's part of our sales process though to kind of walk them through, and then there's that personal touch of sending the text message with a custom message for them. I feel like that's just a lot more effective than to say go on our website and get scanned, because then there's ambiguity and they'll forget. And but yeah, we'll send the message, let them know we sent the text, and then follow up to make sure they did the scan.
Great. We've got about 2 minutes left. Let's see, let me choose one. Biggest challenge in fully automating a workflow. Cheryl, you've got a pretty automated workflow. What's your biggest challenge been?
I think for us, it's maybe a little bit of our team, our founding team, our product people. So, we're not like Abby, where we have a tech background and we can integrate all of that. So for us, it was finding the right people to help us implement that. And then being committed to it, pushing and be like I said earlier, we know that we need this technology in order to keep our margins healthy and to operate efficiently. So leaning into finding those people, when I'd really love to have, other people in different positions, it's prioritizing that tech because it enables everything else.
Right. So the message on technology for your brands going forward, 10 seconds each.
Oh, we are using technology to enable the future of outerwear.
Love it.
Sorry, could you repeat that question? I completely missed that.
Yeah, your message for technology, where you're going with it in 10 or 15 seconds.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, we're using technology to essentially, give people the ability to personalize fashion and experience fashion the way that they want to experience it.
Ravi?
Yeah. I mean, we're going to give people the option to kind of build their whole wardrobe, enhance their confidence, all the things that sort of people need in this day and age through technology. Great.
Thanks. You guys, super interesting conversation. I know we could probably talk for 2 more hours and we just don't have the time. To our audience, thank you for joining. I'm sorry we didn't get to all your questions. Really good ones here. We'll definitely answer them. There's some around uniforms. Anybody in the audience, if you scan the QR code here, It'll take you directly to sign up for Mobile Tailor. You can have a free 1-week trial. Feel free to reach out to any of us. You'll see our names, emails here. I know some of you have gone to the websites. Thank you all for joining me today. Thank you to my panelists.